What's up guys, my name is Ace, and now I've had a little bit more time to let things sink in after getting a bunch of gameplay time on Black Ops 4's pre-alpha build, and it's time for me to properly share my likes, my dislikes, as well as the things that I'm kind of unsure about in this game and maybe just need a bit more playtime to really make a decision on. As with all of these early Black Ops 4 videos, I gotta give a big thank you and shout out to Activision for flying me out, putting me up at a hotel so I can capture this gameplay early. Now, after saying that, which I legally have to say because they did pay for everything to get me there, they didn't pay me at all, but they paid for me to get there, I've already seen a lot of people saying, well, you're not going to be honest because you want to get flown out to future events, and if you say anything bad against the game or you criticize the game, they're not going to fly you out. And this simply isn't how it works. Obviously, if you're bashing them, if you're calling the developers names and you're going after them and being really disrespectful and unprofessional, yeah, they won't want to work with you. However, in this video, when I get to the dislike section, I'm not holding back at all. There are a bunch of things that I dislike about this game, and I'm going to be sharing those with you guys. However, the way I always try to present this on my channel is in a professional and respectful manner. That doesn't mean I'm going to hold back, I'm still going to be sharing my criticism, but I'm going to be focusing on the actual elements of the game, not the people making the game. So let's start it off on the positive side. I'm first going to be talking about all the things that I currently really like about this build of the game. The first thing that I really like about this game is despite all the changes, it still feels like a Call of Duty at its core. It actually kind of handles just like Black Ops 3. It's got a similar art style and it's got a similar feel to your character and the gunfights and everything like that. And I think this is a really good thing. I was a little bit worried when I first saw this that it wasn't actually going to feel like a Call of Duty game and play like a Call of Duty game. But it does. The way your character moves, it still feels just like the good old Call of Duty. Next up, map design. Now, we only had access to 3 of the maps, but out of these 3 maps, I really liked all of them, and this is basically just traditional Treyarch map design. They tend to be a pretty standard linear 3-lane design with a great flank route, as well as very predictable choke points and fighting locations. There's a little bit of room to breathe if you need that, and I don't feel like I'm constantly having to worry about like 6 different areas at any given time. The maps seem to be very well balanced and very controlled in their design, just like how we expect Treyarch maps to be, so quite happy they didn't make any significant changes to their overall map design philosophy. Next up, we have a relatively controversial thing that I personally like, but I do understand it's not for everyone. This is the generally longer time to kill. Now, I did a really deep analysis of the health, the time to kill, and the health regeneration and everything. I will leave that link down below if you want to check it out. But essentially, in this game, it's going to generally take you 1 to 2 extra bullets depending on the type of weapon that you're using. I personally like this. I feel like it really rewards people that have good gunfighting skills. Not only do they position themselves well so that they can get that first shot on target, but they're able to hit multiple consecutive shots, they're able to control recoil, stay on target, and also evade shots in the middle of a gunfight. This is something that I personally really like and I'm really looking forward to. It's nothing too ridiculous, it's not like Halo levels where a gunfight lasts for a super long time, but it's just that 1 extra bullet or so, which I feel rewards people that have a higher level of gunfighting skill. Next up, something that I'm extremely happy about in this game, we seem to have some pretty powerful streaks, and these streaks are reasonable to earn. It's not like COD World War II, where even the higher end streaks are kind of lackluster, and they're also, in some game modes at least, extremely difficult to earn, like pretty much just not worth going for, unless you're running a certain perk that will make it a bit easier for you. In this game, I was fortunate enough to be able to earn most of the streaks that we had access to, keeping in mind that this isn't the full list of streaks. But I was able to earn the Gunship. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of that Gunship gameplay up here from the live stream I did so you can see. And this is basically a copy and paste from Modern Warfare 2's AC-130, and I think that's a very good thing. I've seen some people criticize that, but I think this is great that they're bringing back one of the fan favorite streaks that we haven't had access to for like a decade. So I'm liking the fact that score streaks seem to be very powerful and also realistically attainable. Next up, we have the return of the play of the game feature rather than final kill cams, but the key here is, so far at least, keeping in mind I do have limited playtime, it seems like the algorithm is balanced a lot better in this game, so it's truly the best kill cam is shown. And even though I have relatively limited playtime with this, there wasn't a single situation I ran into where I was like, hey, I had a better clip than that and they didn't show mine, they showed this other one. Whereas in COD World War II, that happens constantly, where it's like, hey, I just got like a quad feed, but they just showed this sniper get a double kill, like what's going on here? I didn't run into that, so as long as that holds up, I think play of the game is definitely superior to final kill cams. Next up, the new game mode, Control. I really like this new game mode, and I think this is going to be great for competitive play. With this one, it's like there's two different hardpoint locations, and they're static locations, they don't move at all, and each team gets 25 lives per round. The attackers have to try and capture those areas by capturing them, kind of like standing in a hardpoint, and the defenders have to try and defend them. They can contest it by standing in there as well, so that the attackers won't make any progress, and you do have to pay attention to the number of lives that your team has left as well. If you're able to completely deplete all the lives of the enemy player, even if the time limit hasn't run out and nobody's captured the points, you can end the round right there. And this is a round-based game mode as well, so there's a lot of back and forth. You get both sides, you get to try attacking and defending, and it's best of 5. This is a great addition in my opinion. It's going to come down to the wire in a lot of situations. I like the fact that in a close game, you're often going to run into situations where both teams are out of lives, and it almost becomes like a search and destroy hardpoint. And it's really, really intense. And I think for competitive play, this is going to be awesome. There's going to be some great moments in this game mode. Moving on to the next thing that I like, this is the new predictive recoil system. My understanding of this, keep in mind, I didn't have too much time to get some proper testing on this, but my understanding is when you fire a gun, it will have the same recoil pattern every single time. As a result, you can actually learn this recoil pattern, and a good player will be able to perfectly counteract that recoil. In the past with Call of Duty, the recoil plots tend to have like a certain trend with each gun, so you can kind of guess what was going to happen, but there were always elements of randomness with that, and sometimes it would get away from you even if you were really good at recoil control, because you simply couldn't predict it. In this game, you can predict the recoil patterns accurately, and therefore you can truly master a weapon, and I really like that addition. Another thing that I like based on what I've seen so far is, at least with certain weapons with their damage profile, headshots actually matter even without the hollow point attachment. Especially if you're dealing with an enemy that has body armor, which you can clearly see when they have that, you're actually rewarded for aiming for the head, and I think this is a very good thing as well. Over the past several years with Call of Duty, they've basically made it so headshots generally don't make a difference unless you're running a specific attachment, and I don't think that really rewards the players that risk it and aim specifically for the head rather than just playing it safe and aiming straight for the body. So I think that's enough things so far on the side that I really like. I'm sure I missed out a bunch of things that I just didn't think of as I was writing down my list here, but those are the main things that come to my mind, at least when looking at the things that I currently like about this game. Now let's get into the dislikes. The first thing that I dislike about this game is currently you can only have one of each specialist character on each team, and this seems like it's even going to happen for public matches. Now, for competitive play, absolutely, I think this should be the case. Only one specialist character per team for competitive play sounds great to me. But for really casual public matches, especially modes like Team Deathmatch, where it's like super casual, I really feel like you should be able to use whichever specialist character you want. Especially when you consider the fact that there are most likely going to be challenges related to certain specialist characters. It's going to be really frustrating if you're trying to grind out a certain challenge and somebody keeps picking that specialist before you get a chance to, and therefore you can't even work on the challenge you want. I think this is going to lead to a lot of people simply leaving games the moment they don't get the specialist character they want. So personally, I would like to see this removed, at least for some of the public match game modes. Like I said, for competitive, it absolutely makes sense to only have one per team. Even search and destroy public matches, I think it makes sense to have only one of a specific specialist character per team. That's fine, that makes sense, but for modes like Team Deathmatch, and I would even argue like Domination, I would like to see the freedom to choose whichever specialist character you'd like. I realize this could lead to some situations where if there is an overpowered specialist character, everybody on one team could be using that, and that might lead to some frustration, but at the end of the day, if we're talking about really casual public matches, I don't really care so much in that area. Next up, something that I'm really not liking at this point, and I feel is really unnecessary, is the new minimap mechanic, that Fog of War mechanic. If you look at the minimap as I'm playing here, you'll notice that a good portion of the map is kind of blacked out. You can't really see what's going on there. You can only see what's immediately around you as well as your teammates. Now, you will still see enemies if they fire unsilenced weapons. They'll still pop up as a red dot on the minimap. So in general, I just don't really understand the need for this Fog of War mechanic or the utility of this Fog of War mechanic. I don't think it really adds anything to the gameplay experience. It just takes away from it. And therefore, I'd be very happy if they just scrapped this mechanic and went back to the standard minimap that we're used to with COD. Another thing that really has me worried with this game are the sniper rifles. Now admittedly, I'm not the best sniper out there or quickscoper out there, and I didn't really get much playtime using the sniper rifles in this game, but I did test out the quick draw mechanics, and if you double stack quick draw on the Koshka, which is the quickscoping sniper rifle of this game, at least out of the two that we had access to, your aim down sight time is roughly equal to the assault rifle aim down sight time. It is ridiculously fast. I think it might even be the fastest that you've ever been able to aim down sight with a sniper rifle, and it maintains a one-shot kill potential, and on top of that, we have that reduced time to kill for all of the standard guns in the game. So it takes you longer to kill that sniper with your regular gun, with your assault rifle or your SMG, and it takes them less time to aim down sight and kill you than we're used to seeing in the past. This to me looks like a very obvious recipe for disaster. I think quickscoping is going to end up being way too powerful in this game. Now luckily, I don't think I was playing against any of the big time snipers like Pomage or anybody, but I can only imagine the amount of work they're able to do with the current state of these sniper rifles. Getting into the next thing that I'm not really a fan of in this game, this is the grenade cooldown, or the equipment cooldown I should call it. In this game, they've combined lethals and tacticals all into one category called equipment, and with this, every time you use one, there's now a cooldown before you get another one. And this happens regardless of whether or not you're dying. So if you throw a grenade, you get killed, and then you respawn, you don't respawn with that grenade. You have to wait till that cooldown completes before you get your next grenade. Now this does make sense if you're using the equipment that's tied to the specific specialist characters. So this will be like the spawn beacon, for instance, or Firebreak has that reactor core where he can pull that and it will kill people in the area while also dealing damage to himself if he uses it for too long. For those ones, yes, those are quite powerful, and those should maintain a cooldown. But for a standard grenade or combat axe or something like that, I really feel like you should just respawn with it every time you die. It feels a little bit weird to respawn and not have your grenade available to use until a cooldown completes. Getting into the next item on my dislike list, this is the body armor. Now, I've already talked about this a little bit before. It's not so much that I feel body armor is extremely overpowered or anything. I actually think the stim is a superior piece of gear. It's just that the body armor creates inconsistencies in your gunfights. I don't like the fact that every time you spawn when you're using body armor, you can soak up an extra bullet or two compared to other people in the game. I really think unless you're using some sort of a special limited time ability, like a specialist ability, everybody's health should be flat, it should be the same, so there's consistency within your gunfights. It's kind of frustrating to lose a gunfight to a guy because he can just soak up extra bullets just because he happened to choose that on his class. It's kind of like having Juggernaut in the game without having stopping power. Like I said, I don't feel like it's significantly overpowered, I just find it to be annoying and unnecessary. Next up, something that I don't really like in Black Ops 4 is the fact that you can't see the number of kills and deaths that players are getting. You can see your own. If you pull up the leaderboard and look on the bottom left, you can see your own kills and deaths, but you can't see what everybody else is doing in the match. I can totally understand wanting to put more emphasis on the total score, especially in objective game modes. I get that, that makes sense, and I think it should be the stat that has the most emphasis, but I think you should also be able to see the number of kills and deaths that players are getting. The amount of score that you get does not paint the entire picture of how good of a player you are or how much of a contribution you had to your team. If you're playing the objective really hard and you're getting a decent amount of score, but you're constantly feeding the enemy team tons and tons of kills and score, you're not being a great asset to your team. On the other hand, I want to see if somebody's camping really hard and they've got a low score but a super high kill-death ratio. I like being able to kind of look at everybody's stats and see how they were playing, see what kind of an impact they had on the game, and generally just see what type of player they are. You don't get this sort of information when you only show the amount of score that they had in the match. In addition to this, in the middle of a match, it's often really important to be able to look at that scoreboard and see if there's an enemy player that's starting to go on a streak. And you can see this by the fact that they have a lot of kills with very few deaths. When you see this, you can start to focus on trying to take that player off of his streak, but if they're just showing total score and they don't show the amount of deaths, you never really know if somebody's starting to go on a streak on the other team. So with all of this in mind, I would love to see kills and deaths brought back on the scoreboard, but like I said, I'm totally cool with putting the most emphasis on the amount of score earned. You could have that as like the big number that really displays prominently, and then on the side you can kind of have kills and deaths. I think that would be a much better way to handle that. Now the final thing I'm going to put in the dislike category here has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, it has more to do with the menus and the way you navigate menus. For those of you guys that didn't know and didn't see on my live stream where I was actually allowed to show menus within my live stream, you'll see that's kind of like Destiny 2's menus, where you have that cursor that you can move around and click on things, which is amazing for the PC players. I'm really happy for the PC players to have a really nice UI that works well for them, but for console, it doesn't work nearly as well. I would prefer if they did have a separate UI for console and PC. I know that might be a little bit too much to ask and it might be too complicated, but navigating those menus isn't quite as intuitive as it would be if we didn't have a cursor and we could just have a standard console menu. I do like the fact that they're shifting some focus towards the PC side of things for those PC players that have been neglected in the past, but I don't like that this seems to come at the expense of console players, at least when it comes to the way that the menu was designed. Alright, so now let's move on to the things that I sort of have mixed feelings about, things that I feel like I need a bit more playtime before I really make a decision on where I stand with them. First up, health regeneration. In this game, you have to manually heal yourself, which is something that we aren't used to in Call of Duty. Initially, I absolutely hated the idea of this. Now, after I got some more playtime with it, I really started warming up to it. That's not to say that at this point I prefer it over the normal health regeneration in Call of Duty. I've just warmed up to it a lot, and I'm a lot more open to the idea. Once I get some more playtime, I'll really be able to tell you what I think about this. Another thing I'm a bit mixed on is the fact that it's 5v5 now instead of 6v6 for our standard modes. Again, this is something when I first heard it, I was like, why? There's fewer kills to go around, this really sucks, it's probably going to play slower. But based on my experience on these maps, it didn't really play any slower than 6v6 from previous Call of Duties, or at least I didn't notice it. Maybe these maps are compressed just slightly compared to previous maps where you don't really notice it when looking at it, but it actually makes a difference when you're playing the game. But 5v5 played just fine, so I'm kind of okay with that, although I do hope they have a ground war. Keep in mind when I was streaming, they did have a potential lobby size of 14 players. So I'm kind of guessing that there might be a ground war playlist where it's going to be 7v7 instead of 5v5, and I think that would play out nicely on these maps if you like that more chaotic action. Once again, this is just something we'll have to wait and see. Next up, the health bar above enemy players' heads. I think Infinite Warfare did this really nicely where the health bar was there and you could see it. I thought it was a great addition, but it wasn't really big. It didn't stand out in a really big way. I feel like in Black Ops 4, they just stand out too much. That health bar is massive, and it's way bigger than it needs to be. It kind of takes up too much of your screen. I think if they could shrink that down a little bit, I'd be much happier. But overall, I do like the idea of a health bar in COD. And finally, for things that I'm kind of mixed on, this is shotguns as secondaries. In this build of the game, we only had access to one single shotgun, and it is a secondary. And this is a pump action shotgun, so you would normally think this is comparable to something like the KRM in Black Ops 3, where it should be a one-shot kill if you're reasonably close to your enemy. I don't think I got a single one-shot kill with this shotgun. It was almost always a two-shot kill, and it does take a decent amount of time to rack that shotgun and get your next shell ready to go. So shotguns so far appear to be very weak. Now, I didn't have a chance to play around with a lot of the attachments. There were a few attachments that seemed to increase your range as well as your damage. Perhaps with those on there, you can actually make a decently powerful shotgun class at the expense of extra class points. So this is something where we really need to see what other shotguns are going to be coming in this secondary area. Are we going to have something that's as powerful as the Brecci from Black Ops 3? I sure hope not, especially if it's a secondary. But I also would like shotguns to be relatively usable, especially if you do spend a bunch of your pick 10 points on attachments for the shotgun. So I think that's a good place to wrap this up. I think I covered at least the main points I wanted to cover as far as my likes and my dislikes, as well as the things that I feel mixed on. Of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what are you guys thinking overall with Black Ops 4? What are a couple things that you like? What are a couple things you dislike? And what kind of things do you just want to wait and see with? Maybe wait until we get a beta and you guys can get your hands on it for yourself, so you can really see how things behave. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more Black Ops 4 content if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.